was supposed to tell you about our courtship and marriage. That was a long time ago. But we lived in a little town called Hamer. It's on the main highway between Idaho and Montana. And it was just a little town. It had a store, a kind of a general store, and it had a pool hall where you could go and play games or buy ice cream cones. And then next to the pool hall there was a dance floor. It was made out of an old building that had burned down at one time, but the rock walls were still there. And then they'd fixed the floor so you could dance on it. So we'd go there for our dances. And I absolutely loved to dance. It was the hardest thing for me last night to see you guys out there dancing and me not being able to, because I always loved to dance. I just loved it. I would rather dance than ate when I was hungry. But anyway, your grandpa was a new guy in that town, and new guys coming into our little town were quite rare. I mean, that didn't happen very often. And so I'd been away all summer helping cook for him, and just as a sideline, I worked for 3 months helping cook for a gang of men 3 meals a day, and I earned $13 for 3 months. And I was glad to get it. And one of the first things I bought myself was a wristwatch. I was a junior in high school, and I had never had a wristwatch. So I was just absolutely adored that little watch. But that was a side point. Anyway, I kept hearing when I was away working, I kept hearing about this new guy that had moved into town. This young man that was so nice. And my brother-in-law knew him, and every time I'd see my brother-in-law, he'd say, "Have you met that new guy yet?" And I'd say, "No, I haven't met him yet." "Oh, you ought to meet him. He's just such a nice guy." Well, the church had this, what they called a box lunch social, and you were supposed to take a fancy box with enough food for 2 people for a lunch, and then they would auction the boxes off, and then you ate lunch with the guy that bought your box. And of course I wanted Tom to buy my box so bad so I could get acquainted with him. I had met him that night because a mutual friend of ours had introduced us. And of course he didn't get my box, but he come afterwards and asked me to dance. And then of all things, and I can hardly believe this yet, he asked if he could take me home. And I only lived about 2 blocks from the dance hall. So of course we just walked. But he was so proper. He never did anything on the spur of the moment except ask to take me home. And he had to think it all through, and it had to be just so and suit him just so before he'd ever say anything. But we did get acquainted that night, and he kept taking me home after church. We'd meet at church, and then we'd go home, and my mother would fix lunch, and we'd have dinner together. And my oldest sister lived just across the road, and we'd go over to their place and play games, because Tom didn't have any money, didn't have a car, didn't have anything. So we had to make our own fun. And so we'd get together at my sister's place and play games or make candy or do something like that. And so I started going with him, and the more we went together, the more we felt like we liked each other, liked being together. And at that time, I was almost engaged to another fellow, and he was almost engaged to another girl. But he broke that engagement. I broke my engagement, and then we got together and ended up getting engaged and eventually got married. So that's our love story. He was a very, very nice young man. your grandpa. Very nice. The thing that I guess attracted him to me right off was he was a gentleman. He had a gentleman's manners, and he acted like a gentleman, and he talked like a gentleman. He never did anything that I was disappointed in. And of course, we had to make our own fun because, like I said, he didn't have any money. He didn't have a car, so we had to find somewhere else to have our good times. But my sister and her husband were always so glad to have us come. And we'd play games, and she'd make candy, and we just enjoyed being with them so much. So a lot of our dates were going to see them, being with them.